The host has started broadcasting the meeting on YouTube. Diane Isis is the co-host now.
Easy now.
I'm gonna be free or die.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones.
You have made it 100 miles to freedom. Would you like to pick a new name to mark your freedom?
Parrotum.
Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. I'm wading through muddy waters. You know I got a made up mind, and I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on.
Harriet, welcome to the Underground Railroad.
And I know what's around the bend might be hard to face 'cause I'm alone, and I just might fail, but Lord knows I'll try. Shine stars fit on the sky. Stand up, take my people with
Thank you. Oh, what a beautiful song. And how inspiring on this day that is Martin Luther King Day. And also, unfortunately, not what we could have would have been the inauguration of our first woman Black president, but something else entirely. However, you are all welcome to our Festival of Resistance and Resilience. I'm Starhawk, Director of Earth Activist Training. I want to welcome Dr. Diane Johnson, who is amazing, many things, a diversity trainer, a mediator, a chaplain and counselor, and a good friend. And our indefatigable and amazing interpreter, Guyan Isis. Charles Williams, who's our co-director of Earth Activist Training, is also hosting and doing tech today, and to welcome all of you. I am speaking from the land of the Kashaya Pomo out on the West Coast, which is a land that has both a heritage of colonization, but also a tremendous heritage of art and culture and music and dance and basketry and so much else. It's a place that represents some recent victories of land back, where the Kashaya, who for many, many years only had a 45-acre rancheria, in the last few years has gotten access to 500 acres on the coast of their traditional fishing and gathering grounds again. So it's a sign of hope. Diane, would you like to?
So, Reverend Dr. Diane Johnson, it's just an honor and a pleasure to be with you, Star, and all of you who have joined us on this day. And I am calling in from Western Mass. I've just moved here about a little bit over a year and a half ago. And we often refer to this as the Greater Connecticut River Valley, Great Falls. I think one of the most amazing things about living in this part of Western Massachusetts is the diversity of work that is going on here, from so much permaculture and resilience, so much work also around reclamation of indigenous lands. And we're often known as behind the tofu curtain, because we're in Northampton and Amherst and the hill towns, and it's a fabulous place to live, and it's a delight to be here. Um, I actually, if folks would like, they can just say in chat, they can just say one word about how they're coming into our time together, and that we can start that way, as well as I have a practice when I work with groups, is I say it's like, we are going to take a 90-second vacation as a way of centering and grounding ourselves. We know that there are probably a plethora of activities that you have possibly been engaged in today, and we just want the invitation to extend the invitation for you to land and center, to notice your breath. If it's notice where your body is, how your body is landing in the chair or the couch or the wherever that you are sitting or standing, and notice the breath in your body. And I'm gonna whatever it will support you in arriving and grounding and centering. And so we will start, and you can even turn off your camera if you would like. And what we're going to do is we're going to uh, give you the opportunity to take a 90-second journey wherever that makes sense for you to be. So we're going to do that, and we're going to start now. It's amazing to me about how 90 seconds gets like expansive. So we invite you to use that in whatever way that that's helpful.
I love that idea. When I go to sleep at night, especially in times of tension like this, I often tell myself, okay, this is my 8-hour vacation. I don't have to think about the state of the world. I don't have to do anything. There's
Yeah,
nothing I can
yes,
do or
yes,
think about that's more important than getting my sleep. So,
yeah, yeah. So, Starry, if I may, I want to start our conversation. A quote that I use regularly is Dr. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's uh, reflection on power, and I think it's so powerful. And he says, "Power, properly understood, is the ability to achieve purpose."
mm,
The strength required to bring about social, political, or economic changes. In this sense, power is not only desirable, but necessary in order to implement the demands of love and justice. One of the greatest problems of history is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as polar opposites.
mm,
Love is identified with a resignation of power, and power with a denial of love. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love,
mm,
right? So as we think about the conversation that we're going to have over however many minutes we have,
mm,
um, that context about how the relationship that power has with love, right? And as we talk about communities, as we talk about coming together, right? How might we, or how has and how might we embody and enact this particular notion of power, right?
Thank you. I love that. And I've done a lot of thinking and writing for decades about power, um, partly to say we often use the same word for many different sorts of power,
Mhm.
and we often think of power as simply as power over,
Yes.
which we're often uncomfortable with.
Hmm.
But power is also power from within, our integrity, our courage, our creativity, our ability. It's also power together, our solidarity. It's also social power, which we'll probably be talking about, our influence.
Hmm. Hmm.
And ultimately, that power is, I forget exactly how he said it, but, that ability to achieve your purpose.
Yeah, so far. And I
So,
and mhm. And I really think, because I don't know, like, I use your framework around power from the amazing book that you wrote after in reaction to Occupy.
uh,
Remember the title?
the empowerment
The
manual.
power, yes, the empowerment man. I use like that whole piece around where you articulate and delineate different types of power. I think it's so important, because there is this, often, I think, depending on the context and the circumstances, but many times power is seen through the lens of being bad,
Hmm.
right? Because power is so associated with the power over, not collaborative power, or the combination of how we use resources, assets, relationships to have power that is in service to justice, right?
Hmm. And I think, social justice movements to be effective need to be able to gain power. And, when I look back on all my years of activism, there have been many times where we always would say, well, we're not interested in taking power. We're interested in transforming power.
Mhm.
But what we didn't realize was we needed to have power in order to transform
Yes,
power.
yes, it's very
And
true.
now I think, today represents, let us say, a plunge into powerlessness on so many levels with Trump's inauguration in
Mhm.
terms of certain types of power. Then I think it's even more vital we find those other sorts of power.
Yes. So one of the things, I mean, I'm an ordained UCC minister as well as being a practicing Buddhist and a pagan and like all the things, right? Or many of the things. But I had the honor to preach at First Churches of Northampton yesterday. And one of the things that I spoke to is what is so essential is that we recognize that the status quo wants us to believe the narrative that we do not have power. They want us to believe that the narrative about how the election of the Orange Man, call him my own political Voldemort, I won't say his name, and that the narrative that that person being elected to take the reins in the United States is their hope is it creates a level of disempowerment for those of us who are profoundly committed to social justice
Mhm.
and the stewardship of the planet and the love of all peoples, the whole array of critical issues impacting our planet and the universe. And so their orientation is to make us believe that we do not have both interpersonal power and collective power, right? Because of the way that a specific political system was enabled uh, to elect someone who's a convicted felon.
Mhm. Right.
And and
As
so
well as a genuinely nasty person.
yes, exactly. Right. The
Uh,
embodiment of the things that are against the
kind of,
values of business.
I know some dear people who are convicted felons who are,
Yeah, thank you. Yes, right. A convicted felon for things that where he should have
yeah.
been convicted for. Yes, as opposed. But I've been on a media fast since the second day after the election. But a really good friend of mine told me that Biden pardoned Letelier.
Yes,
It's like,
yes,
woo,
yeah,
right? So again, an example of like like power and service to justice, right?
yeah,
And
finally, yeah,
yeah, and I know finally,
yeah.
barely, right? Um, but I think in what is so important on this day and in subsequent days and years, and is like in community, what do we need to remember, and what practices can we embody and engage in that keeps us grounded and centered in our power and allows us to continue to envision and create the worlds that we want.
Mhm,
Okay? And there is this I think and I know it is extraordinarily difficult to speak of hope, right? But this is the thing. It's really like we. When I say we, those of us who are change makers and justice seekers, and I'm going to assume that every single person on this call is those two things, whether they identify that with that identity or not. Right? The
uh-huh,
fact that you are on this call, you're a change maker, you're an influencer, you are someone who is co-creating in Martin Luther King's eyes, the beloved community, right? We
mhm,
are creating the beloved community. And so and so to really understand that we are standing on the shoulders and we are part of a legacy of
mhm,
people who have been part of the resistance and I use this word purposely, have been fighting evil. Right? We could have a whole conversation about where that notion came from. But like in the case of the current administration, I'm going to use that word
mhm,
explicitly. So it is so important that we need to bring hope, we need to bring joy, we need to bring self-care. Like I think about Audre Lorde's quote about the fact that self-care is a political act.
Mm-hmm.
right? So all because it's very, very easy to start working so hard as part of the resistance that we lose ourselves and we lose the prioritization of us um, implementing and embodying self-care that allows us to not just survive but to thrive,
Hmm.
right? Adrienne Marie's Brown amazing book, Pleasure Activism. Like, yes, hello, like the Emma Goldman quote. I don't want to be part of any revolution where I can't dance, right?
Yeah,
So,
she's
um,
awesome. I
yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
like hers.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah. I feel like there's a saying in permaculture we're fond of saying the problem is the solution.
mm-hmm,
And I often say, well, I'm not sure that's always true, but it always makes you look at things more creatively.
mm-hmm,
So if we say the uh, the Mumpist regime, someone suggested we call it that. And
That's great. I love it.
is what, what might that be the solution to?
Mm-hmm.
And that might be getting us as uh, activist, as a leftist, progressive, whatever we want to call, what I think of as the broad community of people struggling for justice. Getting us to take a good look at ourselves and our practices and say, how can we be more effective? How can we gain that positive power? To do that, I believe we need to be more broad-based, more inclusive, a much bigger movement than we are. And I also believe we have the capacity to do that and to create that, even in this coming 4 years, which will be difficult on many levels, but
Mhm.
can inspire us to act.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm thinking about as you share that, Star,
Hmm.
it's I've been honored and blessed enough to have Johanna Macy, mentor me like almost 15 years ago, and participating in the first People of Color, the Work That Reconnects cohort.
Hmm.
And I remember, and I'm sure other people have said this too, but the power that we, in terms of whatever your belief system, but in my particular, that we incarnated, like the miracle that we incarnated in this lifetime, at this time, to help create, like to co-create this world. And
Hmm.
and I'm really thinking about that in the sense that, right, so this time, like all of um the all of the elements that culminated to bring us to this moment, right? I think about, how because of COVID and because we were sitting in front of our televisions and on our phones and the world literally was put on a big pause, that then created the space for people to notice
Hmm.
systemic and structural racism from police brutality, and that second wave of Black Lives Matter that happened in a very, very specific way around the world. That those tragedies created the space and the opportunity for us to talk about structural and systemic racism and oppression, and the lack of human rights for so many traditionally and historically marginalized people and social identities. That is some of the what and that shift, that profound structural shift, and the creation of critical race theory, right? Like that came that all of those um articulation of what we know, what has been, and putting names and frameworks to what is happening, that is a major influencer about the backlash, about why we're here now. So there's a part of me that says, like, yes,
Hmm.
in a real technical term, this sucks, right? Yeah. And I call, and the WTF moments that we are gonna have, so many, like, so many times, but that we can, because we are here, because we have assets and wisdom and relationships and the ability to um, create powerful movements of resistance,
Mhm.
right? From so many different places. That what is it, again? What did Martin Luther King say about the arc of justice? Like the arc of justice is long. Well, we're in for a
Yeah.
long arc.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just who I am as a person because I think there's part of me that was born optimistic, right? Is born being, heart-centered, heart-filled.
Mm.
Um, but I do, and and of course that does not mean that we are not, traumatized individually, interpersonally, collectively. But
Mm.
and I think it's so important that we remember that we have ancestors. All of us have ancestors that participated in resistance
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
biblical times all the way forward.
And I often think, we would do well to think about the movement, whatever the hell it is, as an ecosystem, that has many niches to be filled. So, we don't all have to do the same thing. We don't all, like I've heard young white men say, well, I don't know, I don't know when I'm supposed to be in the movement or where there's a place for me.
Mm, yeah.
And often say, well, you know, the place is not necessarily to take center stage all the time, right? Or assume that you're going to. Sometimes the place is to support and to understand that that can be a very powerful position to take.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I always use the Lord of the Rings analogy, right? Frodo's the one carrying the ring, right?
Yeah. Right.
But he's,
Right.
he's not the most powerful, he's not the strongest, he's not even the most interesting, really. Like, he's actually kind of the most bland character. Um, but he has all these tremendous supporters, Aragorn, the true
Okay.
king,
So
Boromir, the warrior, and Gandalf, the
yeah, yeah,
magician.
yeah, yeah. So, oh, okay. So I'm gonna date myself because
Uh,
when we used to do trainings in person, right? And we used to use like video clips from
yeah.
I remember like I'm gonna really date myself, like from the set, or I think maybe I eventually used a DVD. But I
Uh,
used to always use the Council of Alderaan, like that
uh-huh.
about when when
Yeah.
the elf comes with his battle, or like when the no, like when the elf comes with his bow and and
Yeah.
that's right, because that's what maybe we're getting into better or best practices, that everyone has has um wisdom and asset and lived experience that can be
Yeah.
contributed to, right? Like, so when we think about collaboration, when we think
Mhm,
about how in community,
mhm,
one of I would say that a practice that is very, very, very helpful is to do a sense of inventory
mm,
what we have in any one particular community, right?
mhm,
That by articulating and identifying what is often taken for granted, it is helpful because it helps us see what's the array of
mhm,
expertise and the array of relationships that any one particular community has that they can put in service to what their mission
mm.
is, right?
I I often use the Council of Elrond just somewhat cynically to say all of these incredible elves who are thousands of years old and in all those millennia, not one of them has learned how to facilitate a meeting.
Oh,
But yeah, it's like each of us can fulfill a different niche, and there are things you can do that I'm not going to be able to do,
mhm,
and Rose can do
mhm,
that you're not going to be able to do, and things that other people, I had to recognize a couple of decades ago that tree climbing Doing a tree sit was not going to be the way I contributed to protecting the earth because
Mhm.
I just couldn't do it. I could not, even with the best of help, get
Mhm.
myself up a tree. But
Yeah, right.
there are other people who can, and I can do other things.
Mhm.
And I think it's important now when there's going to be so much to do
Yes,
to really say it's okay to take an inventory of yourself as well and
yes,
say, what are my gifts,
yes. So,
and how are they best used?
mhm. And I would say one of the things that that's going to be essential
Mhm,
is that we engage in profoundly rigorous self-reflection that helps us identify what our purpose is at this particular time. Because I think our purpose shifts over during our life cycles, right?
mhm. Yes.
What our purpose might have been in our 20s, might be different than in our 30s, might be different than our 50s, and I would say definitely different in our 70s, right? I'm not going to say which decade I'm part of, but anyway. um, and I think that that is so important because in this pathologically individualistic culture in
Mhm,
the US, so often culture dictates a narrative about what our purpose should be, whether based on a particular social identity, based on our lived experience, class wise, based like all these different things that are supposed to um, uh, actually dictate what our purpose is supposed to be. And it's like the amazing Howard Thurman quote about, you have to do what you love, like that there's a
mhm,
call and a voice. But both there's a quote by Howard Thurman as well as the fabulous letter that Agnes DeMille wrote to Martha Graham, or it might have been the other way around. But that finding our purpose and finding our inner light
mhm.
is one of the most powerful things that we can do in service to the world, because once we I ascertain and build our purpose and build the capacity for us to embody and enact what makes us shine, um with the understanding about that is um in connection to um, contributing to the world. So
Mhm.
I'm not talking about purpose where, okay, there's a whole other call that
Yeah.
we could have about the generational thing about like all of a sudden, like when was being famous a purpose? Like, I'm sorry,
Right.
like being a celebrity, that doesn't qualify as purpose. Although again, the narrative, there's a generational narrative that does conflate that. Like
Yeah.
somehow being known
Mhm.
is misunderstood as being purposeful, right?
Mhm.
But I'm talking about genuine and authentic purpose. And so in uh, figuring that out and building and expanding our capacity to do that and to be in service will help answer that question about, well, what is my role? Right? Like
Mhm.
I'm gonna, the cisgendered white man who says, or man or woman who says, well, I don't have a place in this movement anymore. Well, I'm gonna uh gently invite them to do work around systems and structures,
Mhm.
like you said, that it's like, what are the systems and structures and what narrative are you following, have been following, and the new narratives that we are creating about discernment, about equity. I mean, I always talk about time is a social justice issue. How you
Mhm.
use it, how you pay attention to it. Like if you're in a meeting on your board, just like have a little mini cultural anthropological exercise and sit back and see who is taking up the most space, who is listening, who is leading, right? Let's just do an analysis about what that is like, right? And so I think it is being aware of that there's always the context of what's the water that we're swimming in, what's the water that we have been swimming in, but what's the water that we actually now it's kind of time to take the water out of the aquarium and change it, right?
Right.
So yeah, but what, because I'm imagining, I mean, we're gonna have I think a little bit of time, at least for a little bit of time for Q&A at the
Yeah.
end, but I can imagine, right, what do people want, what might people want to take away from our
I have
call?
a PowerPoint I'd like to
Oh,
show.
great. Mhm.
I should also say I'm getting the message my internet connection suddenly is not as good as it's been all day, so I apologize in advance. I hope that it stays good, but I've been doing a lot
Oops, just as she says that.
of how we form groups,
Mhm.
and we can look at in the movement um, to help our groups work more effectively, and some of the guidelines we could use. So what are some of our basic needs as humans? In permaculture, we often will let's do an analysis. What does a chicken need? Needs shelter, food, other chickens. And what does a chicken do? And how do we create the right conditions to meet those needs and get so we need to feel safe. We strongly need to feel like we belong. We need to be seen and valued. Agency, like we can make a contribution and make an impact. To make sense of the world and understand what's our place in it, all of those. I think one of the reasons we're seeing this upsurge in the right wing have been better than the left at meeting some of those needs. Not in positive ways, but the easiest way to make people feel like they belong is to say those other people don't belong.
Yes, exactly. The othering.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we both are familiar with this wonderful resource, the Othering and Belonging Institute uh, at UC Berkeley. What actually constitutes belonging? How do we actually create a sense of belonging? Um, so,
Um, uh, Star, we should actually share the link to that website either in chat or whatever we might send when we send people the recording. We should include that because the level of resources that they have there are fantastic.
I'll
yeah.
include that.
Give me a second, and I want to share their. They have 10 principles of belonging.
Mhm. Mhm. I think we could. I think it would be. I love that conceptual model. So I think we should share that because it is. This comes out of the conference that they did. I because of COVID, I can't remember the dates, but there were a couple of conferences pre-COVID because they did it every other year, and then we had a couple of there were a couple of virtual conferences, and then I guess it was spring of 2024
Mhm.
they had the conference, and this is where they shared these design principles, right?
Yeah, and when I saw that, I thought, oh, this relates so much to both what you and I were talking about and also what I've been writing about. I have a Substack where I've been writing something I call The Movement We Need, which is kind of a book I'm putting out chapter by chapter around those basic
Yes,
needs.
yeah, Yeah.
and a podcast to go with it, by the way.
Oh, that's fabulous. Fabulous. Yes,
Um,
if you look at right. So, and I don't know whether I don't think they actually did these in priority order. I think that they were just, it's not like they're scaled. But,
mm,
so that first one, the root of the problem is othering, right? Like that we
mm,
recognize um that that as we're designing communities that are focused on belonging, we just have to recognize that the very root of the problem is the dynamic of othering, right? You want to do every other one, Star?
sure. And then there's the principle that everyone belongs, that we're drawing a really big circle of who is we. And I think that's very important because there's an aspect of identity politics that's very important. That's about recognizing our different life experiences and our the different impacts that systems have on us. But there's also a way in which we've got to bring all those little silos together and say, well, this is the big we, that we have more in common than we don't.
Yeah, right. So true. And I think this is a critical piece that we prioritize structural change,
Hmm.
right? That we recognize that in order to create communities and create a world where everyone belongs, in order to do that, that we have to prioritize structural change. And I would add that, so in order to prioritize structural change, we need to have a power and a systematic analysis about what is happening that leads us to
Hmm.
tactics and strategies that create structural change, right?
Yeah, and that means, it's so simple to say, well, women are oppressed, men are the problem. But what we have to say is, well, it's not that men are the problem, it's that patriarchy
Patriarchy. Yes.
is the
Yes. Right.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that white people are the problem, it's that white supremacy, this
See, exactly. Exactly.
structure is a
Right.
problem, and that those problems, they hurt the people who have privilege as well in a different way,
Mhm.
but also in a profound way.
And a metaphor that I often use
Hmm.
that helps people understand structural and the relationship between structural and systemic change in the individual is, and if I was at my office, I would have the Petrushka dolls, which are
Uh-huh. Yeah.
the Russian dolls, which actually someone said actually started in Japan. So that starts with like the smallest little doll, and that's like our inner workings, our inner self, and then that is enclosed by another doll that's bigger, which might be our physical bodies, which then are related to the family that we grew up in, which is related to a community that we're in, that is it's situated geographically, and that those so that there and when you have those dolls, in order to get to the largest doll, which could be the universe, there is a relationship you have to take in order for the larger to get to the small and the smaller to get to the larger. So for the person who says, because this happens in every single I can say this, every diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging workshop that I've given, facilitated, there is the well-intentioned, well-meaning, progressive white person who goes, I'm not racist. I take complete offense that
Yeah.
you say that I'm a racist, because it's like, no, I'm not saying you're racist. I'm saying that the power system, right, the mid-sized doll
Yeah.
is creating beliefs around that other, right,
Mm.
that prioritize a particular dominant culture, right? So we should keep on going because I'm looking
We
at you.
could keep, well, I think we're gonna, if we really want to give people a chance
Yeah,
for conversation, maybe let's just do the first five, but encourage you to read the rest.
yeah,
And
yeah. Or we could,
also,
you're right, because we're ending at 7. So we can maybe what we'll do is we will send this along
yeah,
with other resources, and that people can look at this. But there
yeah.
are some really, really fabulous some fabulous principles. Right.
Yeah. And so recognizing and addressing those power dynamics, both within our group and also in the world and with our group in relation to other groups.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And that leads to, when we do that, we also foster the next principle, foster agency and inclusive co-creation. Right.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. So I'll stop the sharing, and I'd love to open it up and hear what other people are thinking about, wondering about, asking about.
And
Uh,
Dark and I actually am wondering, because with 10 minutes, I'm wondering whether we should actually really ask for questions.
yeah, questions would be great.
Yeah. Because we know that we could talk for another hour.
Easily.
Easily. Right.
We could talk for more than an hour
Yes.
over
Yeah. Like, yeah.
each one of those things.
Yes.
Mhm.
Do you want to have people use the raise the hand?
Yeah, the little heart down there, if you click on that, you can raise your hand and then you jump up in front.
There we
Yeah,
go.
heavily.
Yes, thank you. I'm so happy to see you again, Diane.
Great to see you, dear.
Diane,
Yeah.
been, wow, a year and a half you said that you've moved away. Just grateful to see you and hear your wisdom. And I don't have a question, so I'm just going to let everybody.
Sweetie, oh, that's so sweet. It's so great to see you, honey. And that you're singing. You're still singing. Yay.
Oh yeah, Emily's gonna be with me in just a little while for our ritual this evening,
Oh,
and
great.
we'll get to hear the wonderful gift of her beautiful voice.
Mhm.
Anyone else want to ask a question or Bear?
Oh, great. Thank you, Judith.
Howdy. Howdy, y'all. Thank you so much for holding this space. I'm Bear. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm on the lands and waters of the Chimacum people. And the average age group in our community is over the age of 60. And there's this really big transition that's going on where majority of our community is dying. And I want to create bridges between our young folk and our elders. And I would love to know what your advice is to breaking down those barriers between the two. Because we'll have multi-generational parties and whatnot, but then I'll see our young folk over here and our elders over here. And it's like, how do we bring these two people together? Because it's so important. And so, yeah, I would love your advice on that.
Bear, it's a great question, because I think it is one of the fundamental social dynamics that are happening across a variety, so many different communities, and but you're like, the fact that you're having parties. That's like,
Yeah.
hey, come on, like, let's be real. The fact that you have them in the room together, breaking bread. That's great. And there's something as simple as, actually having icebreakers, like not just socializing, but incorporating ways that people actually get to talk to one another. It might be that you split the meeting between social time and then have a time where there's some engaging dialogue, where you have, you have a dialogue question, and 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 that and that that needs to be facilitated, so people understand what listening from the heart and active listening is. So when they break up into their dyads or triads, the notion of time as a social justice issue.
Mhm.
Right? And because I think it is about it's relationship building that creates community.
Mhm.
Coming together, breaking bread, having social time is the entry point. But then again, what will create some listening and sharing, so that I actually get to know that younger person, that older person. I know that some organizations, it could be, actually deciding on a community service project that could be done together. Having creating a narrative exercise where a storytelling exercise where you have people from those different generations as well as different lived experiences share their story together, right?
I was going to say also maybe even getting some of the younger people to interview the elders to do an oral history of the area, and get their memories and their stories about the place and the community.
Mhm. And I think, and the important part about that though, is there needs to be the space where then younger people can also share their experience. So it's
Mm.
not just only hearing those wonderful stories and hearing the wisdom of their elders, but I would suggest that that part of that process is also younger people then figuring out a way to tie in what their experience is, so there is mutual understanding and mutual narrative experience. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Uh-huh. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Haley, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. That is so true. Like relationship building cannot be done over coffee in 30 minutes.
Or worse, over an organizing meeting where you're inviting people in to do work, but you're not actually talking about anything beyond the immediate needs of the
Mm-hmm.
project.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Sherry. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
National Council of Elders, right? Interviews. That's beautiful. Hmm. Does someone have like is their heart beating fast and their uh, their body's kind of
Oh,
like leaning forward? Does anybody have a question that has that energy in it?
Pay.
I have a question.
Hmm.
Okay, let me see. I gotta find the group now. Oh no. Okay, here. Hold on. Whatever. Lower this. Okay, I'll just say it. My screen is blank. I don't know where I went here. Um, my thought is what is an in with these common things that we all need and want in terms of basic human needs, that we can somehow reach out to people that are interested but are not as aware of we are, um, of this aspect of movement building, that they are looking for something to belong to for change, or like really anybody outside of our circle, but someone who you see is seeking something and they don't have a clue where to look, and they would love all the qualities of the work we're doing, but they just haven't found it. Like, how do you build a bridge to the people on the outside, if that makes any sense?
So I'm gonna how do I condense this? Because I think that there's a learning moment just in terms of your language, right? In there's a us versus them, like those people outside of our circle, right? So that might be the reality, but if we take the tone of we're sitting at a table in a circle and there are people in the other room, like I think it is.
Yeah, us anothering concept. Yeah. I didn't mean that.
Yeah,
I'm not
but
wording it right. Some question in there somewhere about
how do we build
having a
relationships with people who might have a different perspective or have a different okay, I can because I think that there is, right, there are these common orientations around what creates belonging, right, or what, or the range of needs and like all the principles that Star shared. And so it is a question about how do we what are the mechanisms that we can use to
yes.
identify what the I would say that even though everybody wants to belonging looks different to different people, and that sense of safety looks different to different people. So what's the vehicle that we can use that helps make those transparent so that we can then start talking to one another about what we have in common and what do we want to co-create together?
Oh, right. That's beautiful. Like what we have in common is really the bottom line, right? Even if they're like way out there with different beliefs, there's things we have in common that are more important than the differences.
Mm,
And
Yeah.
there's a process called deep canvassing.
yes.
Deep
Which Yeah, you can
Wow.
look it up online. It's, a way of doing political organizing, but different from just showing up and saying, here's my candidate, vote for them. Instead, you start by talking to people and asking, what are your biggest concerns? What are your
Exactly.
fears? What are your desires? What's going on for you? And when you do that, you often find that people have more in common than separates them. There's also
Right.
creating sense of belonging and connection in groups and organizations that if you really start by asking people to talk about their deepest values,
Yes.
what are the things that are
Value
most
based.
important to you?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in rituals, I'll ask people, what's sacred to you? Like in the sense, not what you bow down to, but what you would take a stand for, what is more important to you than your personal convenience or
Mm-hmm.
comfort. And sharing those things helps to create that common ground where then you can start to explore your differences and stuff.
Right. I know that we're running out of time and I want to be so respectful of time. So I see that there's one person raising their hand, but I think Star and I want to just end with a minute. And I also want to do a shout out to the amazing work that Dr. Keltner has done as the founder of the Greater Good Center in Berkeley. I've been on their podcast. He has this amazing book about awe. He's like one of my favorite people in the entire world. Um, and yeah, and that has a range of beautiful resources about bridging differences and yeah, it's just fabulous. But
And
Can that be
Kirsten,
chat?
if you can put your question in the chat, I'll do my best to answer it or get back to you somehow with that.
um, but since I have 30 seconds, what I want to say in 30 seconds, I want everybody on this call um to believe in the power that you have, believe in your brilliance, believe in your beauty, believe in your capacity to make an extraordinary difference in the lives of the people around you, make an extraordinary difference in your life by taking care of yourself and loving yourself and dancing and reading poetry or doing whatever whatever makes brings joy into your heart as we are part of this resistance, and that we can lead with love and we can love anybody from the appropriate distance.
Thank you. And I guess if I'm going to say something in 30 seconds, it would be, yeah, really think about what is sacred to you, what is most important to you. What are your gifts right now? What are your best gifts? And how can you put that to service of what's sacred to you? And I do truly believe that if we do that, we can build a movement that is welcoming, that is truly inclusive, that is broad-based, and that can gain the power that we need to fulfill our purposes of justice and balance and beauty and truth.
Hmm. Yes, thank you. Kirsten, I love your question. I will also find a way so I can answer that question because I
Yeah,
think that's really critical. Really critical. Sarah, I think we have to do another call.
I think so.
Hey, let's do it. Right?
Well, we are going to do a class in the spring. Probably Charles knows exactly when. I think in March, on facilitating groups. Um, through Earth Activist Training, and maybe we can have you come on as a guest. And
That'd be great. That'd be great.
we have a lot of stuff coming up in Earth Activist Training, from social permaculture to all those things Charles just put in the chat.
Great. Yeah,
You know, emergency and disaster planning, building resilience for businesses and communities, and regenerative business design, advanced permaculture around water management and design, and lots of good stuff. So hopefully we'll see some of you back with that. We are donations that you've made to this program are going to go to help support our diversity scholarships for Earth Activist Training, because we have a commitment to bringing the skills of regeneration to frontline communities where people are really in the midst of the struggle. Of course, we all are at this point. But and we will be back at 6 p.m. Pacific time for our ritual of resistance and resilience with Emily. And
Star will be there in spirit because I have to go to another event.
yeah, I know.
Thank you. Really, really, Star, I just always love being with you. So
Me too.
okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you to our wonderful interpreter, Dionysus. Thank you to Charles. Thank you to our whole Earth Activist Training team. And thank you to all of you for joining us. If you want to explore some of these ideas more, again, my book, The Empowerment Manual, A Guide for Collaborative Groups, is one place to start. And the Substack, The Movement We Need, and the podcast that goes with it are other resources that you can look into. And I'm going to be hopefully opening up some opportunities through the Substack for some more group calls and conversations. So maybe we'll see some of you then.
Thanks, Star. Great event.
Thank you all.
Thank you so very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Star and
See-
Diane, Charles and Dionysus. Thank you.
Charles, thank you.
See you later.